a long time, TCG exclusive archetypes have been the laughingstock of the Yu-Gi-Oh community because they just never end up being that good. But Mitsurugi is the best TCG exclusive archetype we've had in a long time, so today I'm going to teach you how to beat it. We're going to look at the Mitsurugi cards as well as some of the variants that are being played with Mitsurugi and some of the combos they have as well. We'll also look at some popular non-engine cards and how they perform against Mitsurugi as a whole, and even cover some really popular side deck options and how they perform against Mitsurugi as well. But first, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. But with that being said, here's the ultimate guide on how to beat Mitsurugi in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Let's jump into it. So first things first is that Mitsurugi is a ritual reptile deck that doesn't really utilize the extra deck that much, and because of that it can be paired with so many different engines in the game. Some of the most popular Mitsurugi variants right now are the Pure Mitsu deck, which take advantage of cards like Pre-Preparation of Rites, Nadir Servant, and the Pod cards to add extra consistency. There's also Ryzeal Mitsurugi, which gets extra level 4 bodies on the field to be able to get extra consistency by using King of the Pharaohs, but also being able to make the end board a lot more disruptive and layered as well. There's also Fiendsmith Mitsurugi, which is great because if the Mitsurugi combo gets interrupted, they can pivot pretty easily into a full Fiendsmith combo, and that is able to play through one of the best hand traps against that strategy, being Droll and Lockbird. Each of these three versions of the deck has actually proven to be a good strategy. They were all able to top YCS Providence in their opening weekend, which is quite a big deal. But there are other versions of Mitsurugi that you can also play. For example, I've seen a Horus list and I've seen an Ogdoadic list as well, which all performed quite well. Now the main playmakers of the strategy really depend on the supplementary engines you're going to be playing with Mitsurugi. For example, in the pure version, Habakiri is easily the best starter and it's still really good in all the other versions as well. But in the pure version, again, you're also playing cards like Aramasa, which is going to be a 3 of in that version, or even Mitsurugi Prayers, which is going to be a fantastic choice. Versus in the Ryzeal deck, an X Ryzeal or an Ice Ryzeal is going to be full combo for Mitsurugi and Ryzeal as well. But now that I've talked a bit about the decks, what does the strategy actually do? Well, let's take a look at some combos, starting off with a pure Mitsurugi combo. With a single copy of Habakiri, what can they do? Well, they'll start by activating Habakiri to special summon and tribute Saji from the deck, which adds prayers to their hand. They'll activate prayers, tributing Habakiri to add Aramasa and special Saji from the grave. They'll trigger the Habakiri to then search for the ritual spell. Now it won't get actually summoned because it was never properly ritual summoned in the first place. Next, they'll normal summon Aramasa to add a Murakumo from deck to hand. They'll activate the ritual spell to summon Murakumo from hand by tributing Aramasa and Kusanagi from the deck. This will trigger Kusanagi to add the ritual back to hand. They'll activate the ritual again and summon Futso from the deck by tributing the Murakumo. That will then search for the mirror and summon itself back out. Mirror will tribute the Futso to summon out the Habakiri from the graveyard, and Futso will then search for the counter trap and summon itself back out. Then they overlay the Habakiri and the Murakumo for a rank 8 of choice. In this case, I've chosen Galaxy Eyes Photon Lord, and you link the Saji and the Aramasa for IP and set Great Purification. This endboard has so much. It has a monster negate with Photon Lord, Futso to summon back the Mitsurugis, Murakumo to hand rip and Raigeki the opponent with IP into either SP Little Knight or Dynamundo with an Omni negate as well, still with 4 other cards in hand. Now that's the pure version, but what about the Ryzeal Mitsurugi deck? What happens if they open up with Habakiri? Well, of course they start by activating Habakiri to special summon Saji from the deck and then tributes it, which will then add the ritual from deck to hand. They use the ritual to summon Habakiri from the hand by tributing Night Sword Serpent and Kusanagi from the deck, which will trigger both the level 4s by summoning Night Sword Serpent and by adding the ritual spell back to hand. They'll activate the ritual spell again to summon Murakumo from the deck by tributing the Habakiri. This will trigger Habakiri to add prayers from deck to hand, which will then be immediately activated, tributing Murakumo to search for Aramasa and specialing Kusanagi from the graveyard. Murakumo will trigger to either search for another copy of prayers for follow-up or Great Purification and summon itself back out. The level 4s are then overlaid to summon out Ryzeal Duo Drive, which searches for Ryzeal Cross and Sword Ryzeal. Habakiri and Duo Drive then make IP Masquerena, and Sword is then specialed and searches for Ice Ryzeal. Now at this point they are finally rank 4 locked. So they're going to normal summon Ice Ryzeal, special summon Node from the deck, and then Ice and Sword overlay for a rank 4 of choice. Some popular options right now are Gallant Granite, which can search for Nibiru like I do here in the combo, Daigusto Emerald to recycle resources and draw a card, and even Dugaris the Timeless for a draw 2, discard 1. Once that rank 4 has been used though, Node will send it to the graveyard to summon back a Ryzeal and overlay for Detonator, which will attach specifically a non-Ryzeal monster. Cross will then shuffle back into the deck both the Ryzeal names that are left and draw a card. So the end board becomes a Detonator with 3 pops or 2 pops with the Cross negate, Murakumo for a hand rip, IP to make SP or Dynamundo, prayers for follow-up or Great Purification, each of which will trigger the Murakumo to search a card and summon back and Raigeki the field, Aramasa for follow-up, and 2 adds to hand including a random draw and or a Nibiru. And of course there are still 4 other cards in hand. So basically the 2 most popular versions of the deck are setting up an insane end board, and if you're wanting to know what the Fiendsmith combo looks like, just go back to the first combo I showed you and imagine adding a card like Desiree or Caesar to that as well. Now look, that's a great turn 1 combo and all, but what can we do as the opponent to actually stop that combo? What are some non-engine cards that are really good right now that we can use against this deck? Well, we're going to cover quite a bit of them, so let's get started. Starting off, of course, with the most popular card in the game being Ash Blossom. There are multiple uses for Ash Blossom in this matchup, some of which are better than others, but specifically it's great against the ritual summon from the deck, and even negating Habakiri can ruin their whole game plan. I also think that negating the duo drive is a great option because it prevents the Mitsurugi engine to blend into the Ryzeal engine. Just keep in mind, if Murakumo is on the field, you'll be discarding an additional card with the effect of Ash Blossom if you want to actually resolve. It's still a good card, and definitely I recommend playing this hand trap for this matchup, but it's not as good as others. Next up though are the Mulcharmies, which are all must plays this format, but not all of them are good against every deck. Starting off with Fualos, this is easily the best chummy against all variants of the deck. Habakiri and the ritual spell each summon from the deck, and Ice Ryzeal does too. And then there's going to be multiple extra deck summons no matter what variant you're playing. Fualos, in my opinion, is definitely a must play against any Mitsurugi deck when you're going second. Aurelia, on the other hand, is a much better card against the Ryzeal version of the deck than against the pure version of the deck, but it's still pretty good against both. They can summon quite a few times from the hand if you let them, including the normal summon, the ritual summon, all the different Ryzeal monsters summon from the hand as well, which is quite a big deal. In my opinion, the upside is quite high for Aurelia, but the downside is also going to be higher than a card like Fualos. And then finally is Mulcharmy Meows, which has some use against the deck since most of the Mitsurugi cards can be revived from the graveyard, but it's not strong enough. It's definitely the worst of the Charmies against this deck. Infinite Impermanence is definitely a great and flexible card, but there really aren't many great places to use it in this matchup. It's going to be at its best in the supplementary engines that Mitsurugi plays. That's because if you use the effective Infinite Impermanence on a starter like Aramasa, they can just use prayers to tribute it off and then get a search for it anyways. Imperm is fine against the deck, but if you're going to use it against the Mitsurugi strategy, I would recommend saving it for Murakumo during your turn because you can force out the effect to discard a card. But Droll and Lockbird, on the other hand, is a game changer. All the 1-card combos kind of just die to Droll, so that's why the 2-card combos come into play. Even then, they're just building a half board with their 2-card combo through Droll and Lockbird, and keep in mind it's a weaker board so you might have a better chance of beating it. Droll and Lockbird isn't perfect, but it's definitely the best hand trap at stopping what Mitsurugi decks want to do, and because of how good Mitsurugi is this format, in my opinion it's a must play in either your main or side deck. Then there's Nibiru, which there are multiple opportunities to use Nib on a Mitsu player, but depending on sequencing, it can actually make their end board even stronger, since Nibiru will tribute the ritual monster so they can search and summon themselves back. So while there are many great opportunities to use Nibiru, it's rarely a good idea, and on its own, Nib just isn't good enough. But what about a board breaker like Forbidden Droplet? Well, the biggest issue with Droplet is that the cost for it is so high. Depending on their end board, you would need to send like 3 cards, one for the IP, another for Murakumo, and a third for the detonator. And even then, they can simply summon back the Murakumo for a Raigeki and a hand rip, and they also might have the counter trap nonetheless. The negation that Droplet provides is really good, but the cost is just too high for it to be elite against this deck. But what about these board breakers like Lightning Storm, Dark Hole, and Harpy's Feather Duster? How good are these cards against the deck? Honestly, they aren't that bad considering that they make a really wide end board. But again, they just rebuild during your turn. I think the real value from these cards come from destroying the back row and forcing out the Great Purification. As for Super Polymerization, against the Pure Mitsu deck it's actually quite good because they're all Dark Reptiles, so you can make Garura as a really solid Super Poly target. But in the Ryzeal version it's not going to be that strong. And even if Super Poly does resolve, again they can just keep rebuilding their board. It's fine, but it's really not the best option. Evenly Matched in theory is great against this deck. You can banish the Murakumo, which means they can't summon it back during your turn, and all the Ryzeal cards as well. But in practice, it's not great for a few reasons. Firstly, they can search for the Omni Negate in Great Purification and also force you to discard a card with Murakumo anyways. Second, the common end board is to make IP Masquerena, which can then be used to make SP, which naturally plays around evenly, or even Dynamundo, which can just be the card they keep so they can summon back the copy of Murakumo. There's also Mitsurugi Prayers, which can be used to tribute off the Murakumo in response to evenly, so it can just resummon itself back in a new chain. And lastly, Detonator can just pop itself and summon itself back out with the Eclipse Winds. Basically, there are so many ways to play around evenly, but if they don't have any of them, then I guess it's a great choice. Those are just some really good cards that are currently seeing play in the meta, but what about some other cards that are also quite popular specifically against this strategy? Well, when you're going first, one of the best options is going to be Deck Lockdown. The strategy already really hates dealing with cards like Droll and Lockbird, and Deck Lockdown is basically just that, with the added benefit of stopping their summons with Ice Ryzeal or even Ritual from the deck. It's a great choice and is actually quite good against many different rogue strategies as well. But there's also going to be cards like Dominus Impulse, which is arguably the best hand trap in the game right now. If your deck can play it, you should absolutely do so because it's phenomenal, specifically against a card like Habakiri or the Ritual summon. If you negate the effect of Mitsurugi Ritual so they can't get Kusanagi into rotation, they have no way to add back the Ritual from their grave to their hand. I also want to shout out Mischief of the Gnomes, which is a phenomenal card against this deck. It's usually going to be like a triple tactics thrust target, and it's really good especially against the Ryzeal Mitsurugi variant because it completely cuts off their access to all the Ritual monsters and all their Xyz summons as well. As for going second, I really want to shout out Salesband, which is a phenomenal card against Mitsurugi. You can use it to call out the Murukuma, which is a huge deal because they can't Raigeki, they can't use the effect to force you to discard a card, and they can't even use the effect in Graveyard to search for follow-up and summon itself back out. That's a huge deal. It's also really good against something like Ryzeal Detonator or Fiendsmith Desiree as well in the other variants the deck would play. Another good going second option is Dark Ruler No More. We've already talked about how good a card like Forbidden Droplet is against the strategy, but because of its high investment cost, it's not a card you would really use very often. Dark Ruler No More still hits all those cards for a 1-card investment, and it also forces out the counter trap in Grave Purification. I also want to talk about Bestials because they're good going first and going second against Mitsurugi, because all the monsters are darks. It's also really important, especially in the Ryzeal matchup, to have Bestials because all of the main Mitsurugi cards are 1-ofs with the exception of Habakiri. The issue is that right now, the other best deck of the format is Malice, which is arguably even better than Mitsurugi is. And because of that, you don't really want to have Bestials in your collection because they don't really do much for you against Malice. But if we ever enter a format where Malice has fallen out of favor and Mitsurugi is still around, then Bestials are going to be really good. Now, what about some choke points against this strategy or some weaknesses for Mitsurugi? Well, first things first, one of the biggest choke points is the effect of Mitsurugi Ritual to summon from the deck. If you can stop the summon of Murukumo, that is a huge deal. Or if you can negate the first summon with Mitsurugi Ritual, that's also a huge deal because they can't get Kusanagi back into rotation, which means they can't add back the Ritual from that grave to their hand, then activate again. You really want to try and stop Mitsurugi Ritual, especially because most of the decks that are playing Mitsurugi as an engine, not as the pure version, are actually playing one singular copy of the Ritual spell. And if they can't access Kusanagi, then they lose it forever. Searching is also a really big problem for Mitsurugi, and because of that, Droll is quite good. By being a Ritual deck, they have to have quite a few different resources to actually get their engine going. They need to have a Ritual monster, a Ritual spell, and the necessary cards to tribute for those cards to be summoned out. That's not always going to happen, so they're going to have to search for those cards, and if you can draw them early on, then their turn kind of just ends. And finally is Murukumo. This is the boss monster of the deck. It is insanely powerful. It is the strongest card in the strategy, and oh my god, if this card just keeps recycling itself back over and over again and constantly searches and Raigekis the board, you're going to have a really tough time to actually beat this strategy. So if you can get rid of it, you're going to be in a great position. And there you have it. Now you know how to beat Mitsurugi, Ryzeal, Mitsurugi, Fiendsmith, and just pure Mitsurugi in general. So if you enjoyed the video, do me a favor and leave a like on the video and comment down below what your thoughts are on Mitsurugi as a whole and what cards or decks you're using to beat this strategy. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time.